to the History Slam podcast from ActiveHistory.ca. Here's your host, Sean Graham.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to the History Slam, everybody. I am Sean Graham, coming at you today nearly live. We are in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I haven't brought this up on the show before because we've been going through all the episodes that we recorded at Congress and then the episode from New York City. The reason we're recording in Cambridge, Massachusetts today is because I have taken up a postdoc at Harvard in the Canada program at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. I'm here for the year, continuing to study the CBC and all things broadcasting. So for the next few months, we're going to be having a lot of episodes from Cambridge and try and get some of the terrific people who are at Harvard to come on the show and talk about some of the amazing research that goes on here. And we're actually recording this on Monday, the 16th of November, and there was a bomb threat today at Harvard, and campus was closed, and Harvard Yard was closed for a little bit. Seems, as of the recording, that everything has settled down and that the buildings are open, but it was an issue that was going on today. But it seems as though, like I say, everything is under control, and there's a heightened sense of security, at least today, with what happened in Paris on Friday as we record this. And it seems like there's a lot of sensitivity to these sorts of issues, which is, I think, a very nice segue into what we're going to be talking about today, because some of the stuff online that you see when there's situations like this, people are very critical of the Muslim community and Sharia law. And there is a new website that some members of the faculty at Harvard Law School are putting together to inform people about Sharia law, what it's all about. It's called SHARIAsource, and we are lucky enough today to have the managing editor of SHARIAsource, Megan Froman, and she is joining us via Skype all the way from California. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
It's really exciting for me, too, because this project is such an interesting idea, and it's got some amazing people involved in it. It's an initiative of the Harvard Law School and their Islamic Legal Studies program. It just had a MacArthur Award to help fund it. So for you, what is the SHARIAsource project?
You know, first of all, it's something that I feel profoundly honored to be a part of. I mean, I think your intro spoke very well to the relevance of something like this in this day and age in particular. And essentially what SHARIAsource is, it's a space that anyone can come to, whether you're an academic, whether you're a policymaker, a journalist, or just someone with an armchair interest, frankly, can come to this site and actually get at the source materials. I mean, one of the challenges that we've seen in understanding Islamic law and the public discourse is that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of competing information, a lot of people making pronouncements or interpretations of particular tenets of Islam that maybe don't necessarily comport with what the sources themselves say, or are certainly not necessarily widely accepted as sort of the correct interpretation. So what this is really a place where people can go to read for themselves, to have access to this information that previously had only been accessible if you were an academic who was affiliated with a specific institution, or if you happened to be someone who had a manuscript, for example, that had been passed down through your family. You know, another part of the site, and I think we can probably get into this a little bit later, but another thing that I personally feel quite an affinity for and that I'm very proud of is that it's a space for intellectuals to come together and comment on the issues of the day. So it's a way for people to kind of be able to read what academics are thinking about a given topic. I mean, a perfect example would be there's a lot going on right now after Thursday's attacks in Paris, and you know, when the site goes live, this is the type of thing that we envision scholars and policymakers commenting on and posting their comments to the site and being in conversation with one another, so that we can all have access to these moments where high-level discourse are really important to getting at the root of some of the questions that are raised by these events. So it's really it can be anything. It's kind of everything for everyone in a sense, because if you're an academic looking to do research for your thesis, it's got that too. But if you're someone that just wants to know what the smartest people in the world on Islamic law are thinking today, you can go and read it, and you can have the same access as a lay person who's not affiliated with an academic institution as someone who's a professor at Harvard Law School might have. And to me, it's really sort of profoundly democratic and a way to get real information out there and to allow people to come to their own conclusions based on reading the sources and reading the commentary from sort of the brightest minds, as it were.
It's such a good idea because, especially with something that is so sensitive for a lot of people and that there is so much misinformation about. Now, before we get into the site itself, just for people who are unfamiliar, and I certainly am one of those people who is largely unfamiliar with Sharia law, and we're not going to go into a deep dive into what Sharia law is, but would I be correct in stating that the common understanding of it is that it's basically a legal system that is derived from Islamic religious texts?
Yeah, I mean, there's two primary sources of Sharia. So I would say sort of a good working, very general definition would be to say something like, Sharia is the legal system that's derived from Islam, from the precepts of Islam. And we use primarily two things to base this on, which is the Quran and the Hadith, which is the life and examples of the Prophet. So, there's a lot that come in under this sort of very broad rubric. I mean, we also include in our definition of what is relevant to a study of Islamic law, a fatwa, for example. So if a religious leader, has a fatwa that he puts out or publishes, that's something that we would want to include on the site because it's relevant to, sort of this universe of Sharia, this universe of Islamic law. And in terms of content, Islamic law covers it touches on every part of life. I mean, me personally, my specialty is Islamic finance. So, something I'm particularly interested in and something I study and practice in my legal career is how can we engage in financial practice in accordance with Islamic values. So that just goes to show you, it really touches on every part of. There's, of course, criminal law. Professor Intisar Rob, this is her brainchild. I like to say she's our fearless leader, and she's really the driving force of the site. She's done some absolutely incredible work on Islamic criminal law. And so it's a system that touches on every area of life, and we want to reflect that in the site. So we'll have sources that can range on a topic anywhere from, sexual purity to, like I said, how to arrange a mortgage in accordance with Sharia law. So it's really exciting. I mean, it's a huge, huge project to try and digitize everything, which is really what we aim to do. But it's part of what makes this project and studying Sharia so fascinating is there's just always more to explore and to interpret and to read.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that you mentioned that it is so all-encompassing, and that because so much of at least the media coverage of it seems to be just about what some would consider perhaps repressive moral codes or the ways in which certain fanatics have misused it for certain purposes, but like you say, it's so much more than that, just like any legal system or religious text is. So having a resource like this to understand it in its totality is very useful to people who, like me, who may be interested in learning more about it, but, in a traditional outlet, a media outlet, you might not have the access, and this isn't to be critical of journalists or the media, they might just not have the same expertise as the people who you've been able to put together for the project.
Certainly. I mean, I think your point that it's not necessarily a criticism of journalists is one that we feel very strongly about at SHARIAsource because, we are so excited about finally having this resource for people. It takes scholars of Islamic law years and years and years and years to understand, their particular area of expertise. So it's a lot to ask from journalists that they sort of have a nuanced understanding of what Islamic law really says. And often there's many different perspectives on a particular idea or a particular precept. So what we envision is to have a space when a question comes up. Journalists are on deadlines, and we all, I think, we recognize it and respect it. And, if I have 4 years to write a book, and need every single day of those 4 years, I can't imagine someone needing to publish a story on the same topic or a related topic in 24 hours. And we certainly can't expect them to have the same thoroughness if we don't take steps to provide that information. And I think it's sort of the site, I feel passionately about bridging the gap between policymakers, journalists, and academics. And this is one, I think, really important way of doing so, which is saying, hey, we understand this is hard. We understand there's a lot. We understand that you're on deadlines, and let's all work together to put out information that's true as is possible, that's nuanced, that's thoroughly researched, and we're going to do our part as academics to facilitate that. And I think we can all really grow together, because I've had so many conversations with journalists, and I know has just gets this constantly, people saying just over the moon with excitement about the opportunity to finally have a place to go when they have a question, and to be able to do the reading themselves. I mean, what we envision, is, as I said earlier, is both a space for conversation for academics to, sort of publicly comment on things, and then also just a portal for primary sources. I mean, a lot of this stuff is so hard to find, and one of the cool things that we've done with this site that I'm very proud of as well is we've really taken the time to figure out metadata tagging. So it's just this very advanced, it's really like Google in a lot of ways. It's a very advanced search function. And this is one of the things you don't get anywhere else. You can just go to this site and type in, if your question is on, it could be on anything. Say it's on interest. Or, there could be more exciting things than interest, though, I'm obviously showing my bias. But, you can just type it in, and every document, both secondary source commentary and primary source that we have uploaded on the site that's tagged with that word will come up. So it just really does a lot of the, heavy lifting for you. And with journalists and policymakers and academics as well, everybody's tight on time. And this is a way to really help people and to take advantage of technology, I think, in a way that is truly positive, and that I think will create, will generate a lot of sort of more efficiency and also truth and information, frankly.
Now, in doing that, one of the things that strikes me as you're speaking is that if you want to put up primary sources and give people the opportunity to examine them, with something like this, I would imagine that a lot of this material is not, the primary sources would not be in English.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So we are doing translations where applicable. So, that's been a huge effort. Everybody has really committed to putting in the time and the energy that it takes to translate, and it's worth it. We see people really committing to doing these translations and getting them up, and it's been successful thus far, but it's, that's something that we realize is required. It's to make this site user friendly, that it has to be translated. But what's cool is we don't just put up the translation, right? You see that on certain sites, and then you think to yourself, who did this translation? How can I verify it? We make sure that anytime something's translated, it's sort of a double pane, So on one side, you see the original, the other side is the translation. So it's kind of a way of keeping everybody honest, if you will.
Right, which is important. But at the same time, and I'll speak to biblical translations, that there are certain debates, or I don't know if there still are, but that I have read about in the past. Historically, there have been debates over the translation of the Bible, that there are different versions based on purely the translation. So there's certain interpretive aspects to it. And this would, I would assume, be a challenge for you, and just in general for anybody practicing or studying law in a language or studying in a language in which the law is not itself written, that there's tremendous challenges to ensuring that things aren't lost in translation, or that
Right.
things are being recorded accurately. So how much is there debate within the law community about the way in which things are translated, and is that something that has to be a central component of the site?
Yeah, well, I'll just start by saying when it comes to legal interpretation generally, whether you're doing it in English, whether you're doing it in Arabic, whether you're doing it in translation, the meaning, I mean, often we see this in Supreme Court decisions, that the entire decision will turn on the meaning or interpretation of a specific word. So your question gets at, I think, what is sort of the heart of legal interpretive work in general, right? So certainly there are debates over words, over even if you're doing that debate and it's in your native tongue. So for sure that happens when it comes to translated texts. And one of the ways that we've tried to sort of mitigate any potential negative effects of either uploading bias, right? If there's one person that's uploading a lot of things and doing all the translation, is to have this other part of the site where academic bright minds in the field are encouraged to comment on what's being uploaded. So in that way, the site will sort of act itself, it's sort of self-policing in a sense, right? Because it's so participatory, it's so user-generated that everything is being checked and cross-checked by other academics that are either, editors on the site or are themselves contributors. And we found, honestly, that people are so engaged. I mean, we already have a team of very talented editors coming from different institutions all over the world who are, incredibly well-respected scholars and folks that are excited about contributing. And they've already, we already see this happening, people questioning each other, but in a, sort of very positive, respectful way, and debates among different folks that are interested in certain things. And that's how we envision it working and being workable, is that, if there's something that is controversial, if there's something that is not self-evident, particularly when it comes to a translation or when it comes commentary on a specific verse, whatever the case may be, there will be someone else there to comment back or to provide the other side. And what we're really looking to do is to just have it out there. We're not trying to say X, Y, or Z is the correct answer. What we're trying to say is X, Y, and Z are perspectives. And you, the journalist, the policymaker, the academic, the person who's interested in the world, you can make your own decisions based on reading these sources and reading the comments that accompany it. And so for me, I think that's a way to really, it respects each person's intellectual individualism. It allows for a real multitude of perspectives, and it gives us some space to say, hey, we're here as a place where all views come, and where we're not making the decision from on high. Here we're just giving you the opportunity to do the reading. We're making it easy for you to access these different perspectives, and then it's up to the user to come to his or her own conclusion. So, that's a long-winded way of saying, certainly, of course, things like translation, inherent bias from the user uploading only a particular type of source, that's stuff that is real. Those concerns are real. But we have, I think, I really believe we've set up the site in such a way that there's enough diversity of opinion, and we want to keep growing it. It's not, it's never like, okay, we have enough opinion. We're constantly engaging with new folks and getting people. I know just last week we had a bioethicist who has done some work with Sharia related topics who's got on board. And I mean, we're just really constantly trying to grow this and include more people and include more diversity of opinion. Our job is to make sure the site stays usable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Make sure everybody's metadata tagging as they should. And then, the user, the person that comes in and does that Google-like search, they can read what's there and come to their own conclusions, which I think is very valuable.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really good that when you say like it's not designed to be this thing where we're telling you what to think and coming down on from high. Especially, I of course haven't gone through the Harvard system in any capacity. I've been here for 2 months, but there's certain. So I don't want to seem as though I'm being critical of Harvard, but I think sometimes institutions like Harvard there's a reputation that sometimes people within them can look down on people who are not within that school or similar types of institutions and are talking down to the general public. So it's really good that this site has this mindset of we're creating a dialogue and putting forth a conversation that isn't trying to hammer you with a specific perspective. It's just trying to present information for you to digest and for you to come to your own conclusions.
Yeah. I mean, I did my graduate work at Harvard and also was a fellow last year at ILSP, which is home to this site. And I think your point that it's sometimes a little bit easy, right, when you have access to all these resources to forget that it's really not everybody can go to the library and check this out. And I think that's one thing that Professor Robb has been, it's really just been such a great thing to have her as the leader because she's so committed to making sure that everyone who wants to read any piece of information has access to it. And it's certainly to her credit because I will say it's not been always met with the most excitement. Certain people in certain camps, and I won't name, of course, any names, get somebody in trouble. But no, you find some people feel really strongly, as they should, and they think, actually, my view is the right view. And if I'm going to participate, this is the only view I want to be available. And people feel strongly. It is, religious law, religious identity is one of the things, obviously, that people hold most dear. So it's certainly understandable. But Professor Robb has been very clear in her vision for this site, which is we want to present information. We want the clearest, fullest picture possible. And that is to everyone's benefit. No matter where the guy in Montana reading this site comes down in his own view of Islamic law, it is to everyone's benefit to have more information, not less. So she's been incredible on that front, really pushing for that. And the site, I think you'll see, we're hoping to go live in the spring, late spring. And I think you'll really see that comes through, the diversity of opinion, the openness to, having debate and to fostering debate and communication. That's really there. So that's something I'm quite proud of.
Now, again, of course, you don't want to name names of people who may have been resistant to the idea of open dialogue, but in general, I think we've all come across the stereotypical professor who is my way or the highway sort of thing, and that's across disciplines and I think across institutions. But again, without maybe specifying different people's perspectives, who have you approached? You talked about getting leaders in the field of Islamic law. Are you looking mostly at people who are looking at it from a scholarly perspective in law schools, or are you also talking to practitioners?
Well, so we started out looking primarily in academia because that's where we were. So that's where a lot of our contacts are, and it seemed like an appropriate place to start. So, we began there, but we weren't just looking at Harvard. We partner with Australian Catholic University. We have engagement partnership all over the world from academics, literally, I think on almost every continent, not quite every continent. So that seemed like a good first step, but we are now at the point where we're really looking to expand. We have, in the last few months gone on to include a lot of practitioners. I think that was sort of the next plane, if you will. And that's been great. There's actually a lot of lawyers out there that engage in the practice of Sharia law in some capacity. I am a practicing lawyer in my own practice, while it's not entirely based in Sharia law and Islamic finance, it certainly comes up in my practice with quite a bit of regularity. And I found that there's a lot of people excited to talk about how their work intersects with Islamic law. Just they needed the platform. And then simultaneously, we had a conference a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was almost a month and a half ago now, where we invited a number of journalists and a bunch of policymakers, and they were also very excited to get on board. So we're now expanding beyond academia, and our hope is to get as many, policymakers, journalists, practitioners as academics. We really want to have this be as democratic of a space as possible in terms of discipline and approach and opinion. So it's been going really well, frankly. I have to say, people are both very generous with their time and very excited to participate. I think everyone's just feeling a little bit relieved to finally have a space where they can, explore these questions and have access to information. So the response has been overwhelmingly positive.
And how are you governing that? Because we all know that the internet can be a very negative place. So in creating an open dialogue, how are you ensuring that it doesn't get taken over by...
Become a Reddit thread or
basically,
something?
Yeah. Essentially, yeah.
I know. Well, listen, that was definitely something that we spent a lot of time thinking about, because it is a real concern, and the internet can be a crazy place. So we've implemented a series of processes to ensure that the quality of commentary, the quality of the source is sort of up to par. So, it's the type of process where when someone, whether you are a tenured professor at Harvard or, somebody who has been doing research on their own on the side and has had one case related to Sharia law or something. I mean, it really doesn't matter who you are. Your piece, whatever it is that you want to upload, goes to a 3-person panel, and each person does a blind review and basically just says, here are the issues with it, yes, this is ready for upload, kind of just gives their assessment. And then that goes to me, the managing editor, their assessments. And based on that, either the person will get feedback, sorry, this isn't appropriate, or this doesn't meet the standards of the site for whatever the reason may be, or it's, yes, this piece has been approved and we upload it. So, it's open and encourage all to participate for sure, but it's certainly not anyone can upload at any time. I mean, we have numerous checks that we have in place, and that's how we do it. I mean, we may have to revisit that if the site gets so wildly popular that we have thousands of submissions a day. Then we're going to need to change something, but I think that'll be a good problem to have if we get there.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where, you deal with that when it comes, if it comes. And if it comes, that's terrific.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we're hoping it comes, though. I can't imagine that I would be ready to read 1,000 submissions a day, but who knows? Maybe it could. Maybe I will be able to.
Right. And when you say submissions, are you talking about short form articles or long form pieces or interpretations?
We take anything.
Okay. It's
really cool, actually. I mean, it's the kind of thing where I was talking to someone the other day and he said, I have this idea I've been kicking around, but it's really not, an article yet. It's not a 40-page article. It's a 5-page, it's a cross between an editorial and a think piece. And I said, well, send it to me. And it can be anything. That was perfect for the site. It was just kind of thoughts that an academic had on some recent news. And then the other, at the other end of the spectrum, we have very polished articles that are article length, long form that people want to put up, and everything in between. I know a couple of people that are associated with the site, an editor and someone who is identified himself as a contributor, someone who wants to contribute commentary and primary source materials. They did an interview. So they just wrote out some questions, chatted for a while, transcribed it, and that's going up. So it's really like anything that people want that adds value, we're open to.
That's good. That diversity of it, particularly when you're trying to find a diverse audience, right? Having a variety of outlets or a variety of media that people can consume is really good. Because, the guy who just wants to read a quick 2-page little explanation of something can find it. And then the person who wants a 40-page article, and that it's all in the same space.
Right, exactly. And we found that, the needs of folks are really different. I mean, this is one thing in doing some of these conferences that we've done and asking people, soliciting feedback about what their needs are. A journalist is not, maybe interested in the 40-page paper for sure, but doesn't have time. So, reading a shorter piece, reading an article that is in interview form or, even a podcast, for example, we can do different kinds of media. That is very useful for someone like a journalist who's on a tight deadline, maybe less useful for someone that's using this site for their thesis research, but we've got stuff for them too. So the idea is to actually meet all needs. And how often do you get to say that? We're meeting all the needs.
Very rarely, especially in an academic setting. It's very rare.
I know. As soon as I said that, I was like, I'm sure someone's going to email me and say you have not met this need.
Right, yeah. You have not solved all of society's problems.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
Not today. Ask me again tomorrow.
We're almost out of time here, so I've held off on asking this question, but I think it's important because one of the things you've been talking about is that, this accessibility issue. Now, I've recently become close with a lawyer who is actually a legislative drafter in Canada. He works for the federal government and writes legislation. And he can't talk specifically about a lot of the stuff he does while he's doing it. But we've talked a little bit about law and the writing of law and how even a bill that seems very straightforward has to be somewhat long and have to have a lot of legalese in it to pass the standard of being a law. Now, again, this is in the Canadian setting, so maybe it's different in Sharia law, but generally speaking, it seems as though lawyers and people who understand the law have to use a lot of jargon, a lot of language that lay people might not understand. So in trying to make something accessible, just in terms of the legality aspect of it, like how do you take that idea of the law being inaccessible and make it accessible for folks?
This is certainly my own perspective. I personally find much of what I read when I'm studying Islamic law to be more coherent often than some of the crazy legalese that I see day to day. But with that said, it gets back to, I feel a little bit like a broken record, but it gets back to what the role of the academic, the policymaker, and the journalist who's commenting. It's for them to provide context if they want to. And that's really sort of how I think someone who's just looking at a fatwa, for example, who may not understand the meaning of it, they can then read the different commentaries on it. Say 3 people have written, this is, in my view, what fatwa X means. Then they can say, okay, this is what one person thinks, another person thinks this. I'm going to read those 2, read the fatwa itself, and hopefully that will be able to guide me to some understanding of what it is that I'm reading. But with that said, when we say accessibility, part of that is we really just mean access. So we do want people to understand. We want the commentaries to help potentially guide people, or at least to provide, frames of reference for folks when they're trying to think about what it means to them. But we also just want to get it out there. That's one really important thing for us, is just to have people be able to read it, which has not happened to now. So, there's different sides of that coin, but hopefully with time, as more folks are commenting and more sources get up there, it'll sort of all come together. And when those questions arise for people, they'll be able to have a place to go to contextualize.
So in terms of the editorial side of it, you're looking more for the content of it as opposed to any stylistic thing. So the site will really reflect each individual writer, how they write in terms of stylistic purposes.
Yeah, we have some minimum style standards that we ask people to adhere to, but in terms of if you're writing a policy paper, it's going to be very different than a senior thesis or a academic article, and we want all, so we take everything as long as they meet the minimum standard. And our standards are quite rigorous, so you're not going to see lower quality stuff on the site. We really ask that people only put their best up there. And we've seen just incredible contributions so far, really high quality pieces. So it's worked very well. But in terms of a form or a specific type of piece, no, we're really open. We want everybody to participate, and it's been great so far.
It really does sound like a terrific project. So again, it's SHARIAsource, and you're hoping, you said, to go live in the spring.
Yes.
So no firm dates yet, I would assume?
No firm dates yet. I mean, we're working hard, plugging away, but certainly in 2016, in the first half of 2016, hopefully in the spring, and we'll be sure to let you and your listeners know when we're officially live. Maybe we can come back and talk about how the going live process is going.
Yeah, that'd be terrific, and talk about the initial reaction and that kind of
Yes.
stuff. And in terms of just once it does go live, is this going to be a .org or a .edu or has that been settled yet?
I think it's .net.
Okay.
Actually. But as soon as I say that, now I'm like, what did we decide on? You know what? Actually, I take that back. It's .com. It's .com.
Okay.
But this is obviously a discussion that we had because
Sure.
I'm trying to remember where we came down. But yeah, I mean, we wanted it. It's of course affiliated with Harvard because Professor Rob is at Harvard and that's where it's home. But we really want something that makes clear that we have a lot of partners and we have a lot of, different people involved. So this seemed like a way to be a little more democratic in naming.
And just in terms of the accessibility, a .com is more accessible, and more people seem to find a .com than a .edu.
100%,
Right.
completely.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see it once it goes live, and like you say, maybe we could have you back once it goes live, and we can talk about, like you say, the rollout process, some of the initial feedback, because it was a really terrific project, and I'm happy to hear that so many people are behind it, and you're getting some great contributions, and things are really starting to come together.
Yeah.
So all the best moving forward, and
Great.
We'll keep tabs on you, and we'll definitely support the project in any way we can here at the site and through the show.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's really, really been a pleasure, and we are so gratified by the interest and excitement. And as you know, it's such a long process getting these things going. So for us to see that people want to hear about it and are excited, it really it lights a fire under us and keeps us going. So thank you.
It's our pleasure. Certainly, I can relate to working alone in an office, after midnight, working on these things, and not sure if they're ever gonna see the light of day. So when they finally do, it really is a good feeling. I agree.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
That is Megan Froming, the managing editor of SHARIAsource. Thanks again.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, comments for the podcast, historyslam@gmail.com, Twitter @Dr. Shawnee Fever, and if you're out and you see Enrico Palazzo, please say hi for me.
Thanks for listening to the History Slam podcast. Be sure to check out Active History for more features, articles, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes.